This is a presentation on how developers can earn Bitcoin Cash from developing and running a REST API. This presentation is going to have three parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about what REST APIs are, the economics behind them, and some of the problem areas that I have observed in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem and my solution for solving those problems. So if you're non-technical, please stick around, but you are interested in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem and where it's headed, please watch this first part, which is probably going to be about 10 minutes. And then the second part, I'll give a demo for the solution that I've developed to these problems that I'm going to present in the first part. And then the third part is going to be a code walkthrough where I'll actually deep dive into the code behind the solution to help developers use this and implement it into their own projects. So don't get bogged down by the acronyms. An API is simply a way for a computer on the internet to talk to another computer on the internet. That's all an API is. It stands for Application Program Interface, but that doesn't matter. It's just a way for a computer on the internet to talk to another computer on the internet. REST is just one type of API. There are several types of APIs, but REST has become probably the most dominant API on the internet today. So if you go to Amazon.com, your web browser is talking to their server using a REST API to get the products and then display those products in your browser. Same thing with Twitter. When you log into Twitter, it's just a dummy page that loads, and then your browser makes a REST API call to get your Twitter feed and that content that it then populates your web browser with. So REST APIs are ubiquitous. They run what we understand today as the modern internet. So they're very important. And the second statement is somewhat controversial, and I'm going to spend pretty much this whole first part validating it. And that from what I can see, free REST APIs are hurting the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So let me deep dive into this. First of all, I need to give a shout out to Cameron Lee and Vin Armani. They are two active people in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem that have also been speaking out against this lack of profit seeking and how it's ultimately hurting the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. The fact that we're not profit seeking enough, and we're not profit seeking in the right ways. And so I'm going to take that general message and focus it specifically on REST APIs today. So here's some examples of free APIs that exist in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. Now, ElectrumX and Electron Cash, Electron Cash is probably the most popular wallet. It has a lot of plugins and extensions, and a lot of people just love that software. And in order for it to operate, it has to talk to an ElectrumX server. Now, I haven't heard of any issues with people running ElectrumX servers. There seems to be plenty of them, and a lot of people seem to run them for free. So this is actually probably the worst example I have. But hopefully you can see that because people are running ElectrumX servers for free and no one's paying for it, that could very easily lead to a tragedy of the commons. And in particular, the Cash Shuffle, which is a plugin for Electron Cash, and helps add fungibility and financial obfuscation to your transactions, that really just runs on one single server. Now, the server is open source and anyone can run their own server, but so far no one's done that, or very few people have done that, because there's no financial incentive to do it. And up to this point, Cash Shuffle has been experimental software, and there's literally, I can count on two hands, myself being one of them, the people who helped develop the protocol and test it out and get it to the state where it is today. Now, as this gets more popular, there's going to be more and more of a load on that one single default server, and it's built very well, so it might be able to scale for a while, but at some point, there's going to need to be additional servers. Otherwise, Cash Shuffle's just going to not scale and have a bottleneck. And there needs to be a financial incentive for people to run those servers. and then again, if you're going down the list, you can see SLPDB and BitDB. What's happening right now is that these are incredibly expressive databases that require significant computational resources in order to run. And SLPDB didn't exist before January 2019, so it's October. It's been in existence for roughly 10 months, a little less. BitDB's been around for maybe a year, almost exactly a year, I believe. So up to this point, they have been experimental software, and the number of people using them has been very small, so scaling has not been an issue. But now that these services are becoming better understood, their expressivity is becoming appreciated, and more people are using them, we're having serious scaling issues. And because these things were developed without any form to monetize them, we're getting this tragedy of the commons, particularly Fountainhead and Bitcoin.com, who I work for, and I help maintain our copy of SLPDB. I'll talk a bit more in a minute about the sort of tragedy of the commons that we're experiencing. And then, of course, I help maintain rest.bitcoin.com, and we're experiencing the same thing there. It's not that people aren't using the service, it's that too many people are using the service, and we don't have a way, we don't have a pro tier, we don't have a way to move people from the free service to a paid service so that the end users can pay for the services they're using. So this is a common, if you've heard the phrase tragedy of the commons, it's a well understood economic phenomenon, and it's also well understood that the fix to a typical tragedy of the commons scenario is to create a marketplace. And what this tragedy of the commons is specifically with REST APIs is that they're open to abuse, and they're open to disproportionate use. So in the case of, say, SLPDB or rest.bitcoin.com, the legitimate businesses that are trying to use it to move this ecosystem forward and professionalize this ecosystem, and create the smooth UX that everybody wants in order to use cryptocurrency as a regular currency, they're having to compete with the people who are just actively trying to attack them because they don't like Bitcoin Cash. They're also competing with just the experimental developers who are just trying to learn this new technology and may get a little overzealous. They might run requests a little too fast or a little too big. And there's no way for these legitimate businesses to set themselves apart and say, hey, I have money, I'm trying to build my business on this, and I'm willing to pay to make that happen. I need a business partner. And so that's this bullet point here about the free equals business risk. Like, as an entrepreneur who's, say, maybe trying to make a new app or a new wallet or a new financial service, anybody trying to experiment with BIP70 and these new non-custodial financial services, they need these REST APIs. And it is simply too risky to build your business on a free service where you have to compete with everyone else. Running free APIs hurts legitimate businesses. So let me give a more concrete example. So the most fundamental piece of software in our space is a full node. Now, to run a full node, you need about 200 gigabytes of storage, and you need some computing power. So on DigitalOcean, that's going to cost you about $30 to $40. And that would be like the most fun. You'd need additional software, but that's the most fundamental piece of software you would need to run. So in a worst case situation, a business could pay $30 to $40 a month to run their own full node. And they would be the only ones, and they would have dedicated use, and they wouldn't have to worry about sharing it with anybody else. Now, if a developer simply wrapped a full node around a REST API and charged $1 per month for access, they could probably service 30 people. And now all of a sudden, you have 30 people paying $1 instead of 30 people paying $30 to run their own infrastructure. So that's a huge economy of scale. That's a 30x economy of the scale right there. And the other side of this is that businesses need to focus on their core business value, and running infrastructure like full nodes is not a part of that. They need other businesses to partner with to run these infrastructures so that they can focus on their wallet app or whatever area of value they're trying to create. And so you can see from this $30 example that it is highly advantageous for a business to pay $1 a month to get that basic fundamental need fulfilled so that they can focus on their things rather than trying to hire a highly specialized person and paying to run their own dedicated infrastructure. That just doesn't scale. And so hopefully you can start to see what I'm talking about how free REST APIs are hurting the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So I will conclude the first part of the presentation with that. Hopefully I've made my case. So let's talk about solutions. And generally, so I'm gonna demo this solution, and the solution to this problem is called a JSON Web Token, or JWT, or JOT as I tend to call them. It's an acronym, so there really is no proper way to label it. So I just call it a JOT token, JW, or a lot of people call them JWT tokens. And what they are is, first of all, let me clarify, they are nothing like SLP tokens. SLP tokens are like another type of cryptocurrency. That's not what a JOT token is. A JOT token is a string of characters that encrypt a message and that has an expiration date, and they are a commonly accepted way of giving access to a REST API. And what I'm going to demo today is a web page and a server for paying Bitcoin Cash in order to receive a JOT token and to get access to a REST API. So what I'm going to show today is, let me jump right into it. This is the demo I put up, is at demo.bch-test.net. This is my own personal fork of rest.bitcoin.com. So let me just show you that in case, if you're someone who's watching this and you're not familiar with rest.bitcoin.com. This is a REST API, and if you bring up, which doesn't have a user interface, it's just a way for a computer to talk to another computer, like I said. But if you go to rest.bitcoin.com, it has what's called a Swagger user interface that lets you exercise each of the REST API endpoints. So here's an example right here at the top, address details, where you give it a Bitcoin Cash address and it will query an Insight API for information about that address. So you can see right, this example address, it has a balance of 0, but it has sent and received some Bitcoin Cash. It's been involved in a lot of transactions. So this is the kind of information that a wallet would need in order to spend money, or a lot of other type of applications. This is like a very fundamental piece of information for an application to do something on the Bitcoin Cash network. So that's the value, and this is how REST works. Now, bch-api is my own personal fork of it, so that I can try out new ideas and not impact the base product. So that's what I set up here at demo.bch-test.net, and I have my own version of the documentation you can click on and look at. So this is the API that we're going to be interacting with for this demo. Now I've posted, in fact, let me jump down here. I'll come back and show this list of where the software lives after I'm done giving the demo. But the code I'm going to run is in this gist, and I'll come back and talk about it. It's also right here. Now what this is doing is it's going to call one of the API endpoints once per second. And if it succeeds, it's going to report a success. So so right now it's not using any JOT token. This is a publicly open API, just like most of the ones that I was just nagging on. And what it's set to is 10 requests per minute. And you can see right here, it just errored out on the 11th call saying, hey, you've been using this REST API too much and I'm cutting you off. The limit for the public access is 10 per minute, which is very low. Now it's enough for for developers to play with this API and get a feel for it, but it's not nearly enough to run a business on top of, and that is very much by design. But now we're going to move on to the demo of the JOT token by getting a JOT token and putting it. So this is the code I was running. This is the actual call to the REST API. This line right here that I have commented out is where you would put the JOT token, and this right here is the JOT token, and I'm going to show in a minute how to get one. But now, by adding this one line to the header, I can I have added an authorized JOT token, and now the server is going to increase my rate limit from 10 per minute to 100 per minute. And so this is making the call once per second. So imagine you had a wallet that's checking its balance once per second. That's what I'm essentially simulating here. And you can see it's past the 10th request, and it has not errored out. This will continue until it reaches 60, in which I have it programmed to stop. But right there, that's the demo of between having a limited public access in order to give people a taste for it, and then a JOT token in order to have like a pro tier or a more professional access, increase rate limits to an API. Now, how did I get that JOT token? That's the real demo. Let me demo that. So I'll try to leave this demo up as long as possible so that people can try it out. It's not really intended to be used. It's just like professionally or as a business. It's just a demo. But this is I'm going to log out here, and I'm going to clear this so you can see. I set up this other part of the demo at jot.bchtest.net, and this is the front end that I created. It's very simple. I'm going to create a new user, QQQ. I'm going to create this new user, and it's just these two screens. There's the home screen, and there's the profile screen. And it's just these two screens, and if I log out and clear that, I can log back in. Let's see what happened there. Well, demos never go as according to plan. Okay, I must have typed the password in wrong. I'll go www and www create. Okay, so I'm in here. You can see my name. The JOT token is empty. I have $0 in credit, and I've been assigned a Bitcoin Cash address, and that same Bitcoin Cash address is displayed here as a QR code. Now, if I click this, and there's two buttons. If I click Get API Token, it's going to tell me I don't have enough credit in my account. I need to send some Bitcoin Cash. So I'm going to... So what I'm trying to do is follow this. So we just created an account. I tried to get a JOT token without paying, and I got a failure. Now I'm going to underpay. I'm going to send some Bitcoin Cash to that address. So the demo I have set up for 5 cents per month. So the JOT token that you get will expire after 30 days. And you'll need to get a new one, and it costs 5 cents. Now, obviously, that's not very practical. It's just for demo purposes. I'll show in the code at the end here in part 3 of this presentation on how to adjust these settings if you want to set up this application for your REST API. So if I hit Update Credit, it's checking the Bitcoin Cash address. and you can see the credit updated. I have 2 cents. I just sent it about 2 cents worth of Bitcoin Cash, which is not enough. And behind the scenes, what happened is this Auth server has a wallet and assigned this user this Bitcoin Cash address. So when I click this button, it swept the funds at that address into the company wallet and credited the account with the fair market value at that moment in time. So now if I try to get my API token, it'll say, oh, not enough credit in your account. You need to send BCH to the address listed. And it returns this 402 error code, which is the HTTP error code for payment required. Let's see if, yeah, well, you can Google that to prove it to yourself. Okay, so I didn't have enough money, and I can keep clicking this button, and you can see the credit is not increasing because this address is empty. And if I brought this up on a Explorer, you would, let's just do that. There's going to be 2 transactions, one from me sending the Bitcoin Cash, and a second transaction from the Auth server sweeping the funds. There we go. No tokens, 2 transactions. So I sent some money, and then the Auth server credited my account and removed the money. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to send some more Bitcoin Cash. Okay, so I just transmitted it. It'll probably take it a minute, take the server a minute to, or the indexer, to see that transaction and to update. So yeah, it hasn't updated yet. I'm just going to give it a second. Let's just see where we are here. So we underpaid, watch a failure. We just paid, and we're going to watch the balance update. The reason this is so slow is because I'm using my own personal indexer, which doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower. So this is a perfect example of a REST API where an indexer is a perfect REST API. So if this tragedy of the commons wasn't so prevalent, then I could use someone else providing that sort of service that's snappier. But it just came through, and you can see my balance increased from 2 cents to 25 cents. So now I can get, I actually should have sent less than that, but this is fine. Now I can get my API token. So there it is. This just populated, and you can see here in the console. So this is my JOT token right here. And so now if I can go in here and I can paste this JOT token in here, and then I can run the demo, which I already showed. So that would unlock the ability to move from 10 transactions per minute to 100 transactions per minute. And then another feature that I've added is a refund mechanism. So if I go and I update my credit, you can see it dropped down to 20 cents because I just spent 5 cents on a new API token. I can click this Get API Token button again, and it'll give me a new JOT token. You see I got a new JOT token. Like I said, these things expire after 30 days. So if 15 days have gone by, and I just want to make sure that it's going to be fine for the next 30 days. And this is also a REST API, so this can all be automated. Everything I'm showing can be 100% automated. So an application can get a new JOT token, and as long as the account associated with it is funded, then it will have no problem. And a refund will be generated for the time that the older JOT token still has left before it expires. So if I go back to update credit, you can see my credit has only just barely changed by a few fractions of a cent. because it gave me a refund for 5 cents over 30 days, and I only used like a couple minutes of that. So just kind of an important feature. Like there's no penalty to renewing your JOT token, because the system automatically will credit you for the time that the old JOT token was not used. Okay, so that's the demo. That's part 2 of this presentation. So let me go a little deeper into the code and where you can find it if you are interested in this solution and you want to incorporate your own solutions. So the Auth Server that actually does all the magic, I have that at it actually lives at auth.bchtest.net, but there's no front end for it. The code for the Auth Server is actually in the Permissionless Software Foundation, which is a group that I started. And it's right here, this JOT bch-api. So if you go to github.com, Permissionless Software Foundation, it's right here. That's the backend REST API server that did the JOT token handling and the handling of the Bitcoin Cash. The front end, this part that I just showed you here with the QR code, logging in, logging out, that lives here at JOT bch Front End. The demo that I just created, this code right here that I ran, I also uploaded as a gist right here. So if you go to gist.github.com, you can search for my name, Chris Troutner, and then the gists get these hashes, so they're not very human readable, but it's called JOT Token Demo. And so you can get this code that I just demoed, which lets you comment or uncomment this line once you have a JOT token here, and that will let you demo the difference between being able to get 10 requests per minute versus 100 requests per minute with an appropriate JOT token. So how does this work on the REST? Like, let's say you have your own REST API and you want to implement this scheme. How did I implement this in bch-api, which I have at demo.bchtest.net? And if you want to know more about bch-api, you can go to bch-js.cache, and I have my own forks. I have my own fork of rest.bitcoin.com called bch-api, and you can see the documentation for both. And I also have my own fork of Bitbox, which is a JavaScript library that talks to rest.bitcoin.com. Again, it's just my own personal fork where I can try new ideas. And so if you want to check that out, you can see example code and API documentation. Everything is linked from bch-js.cache. So let me go through the code in terms of what you would edit in order to implement this scheme in your own REST API. So there's two areas. The first one is in this middleware JOT dash. So I should show you how to access the code. If you go to bch-js.cache, you can go down to bch-api and click on that, and that'll take you to the GitHub repository where bch-api lives. And this is in the JWT Rate feature branch. So you got to click on this drop down and go to that JOT Rate feature branch. And then the code is in source middleware JOT auth. So go to the source directory, go to this is an Express.js app, which is a very common Node.js JavaScript framework for building REST APIs. So you should hopefully be familiar with that. So right here, this JOT auth library in the middleware folder is where this middleware, what it does is it looks through the header and finds that JOT token. So in the demo code, I have this portion here where I set the headers. I set a JSON response, and I set the JOT token. So what this code is doing here is it's getting the headers from that request that my client-side software sent, and it's looking for an authorization header that starts with the word token, and then there's a space, and then there's a JOT token. And so if it finds it, it will add it to this locals dot JOT token property, so that the other software lower down in the stack can read it. So that's the first part. The second part is here in the route rate limits. This is another piece of middleware, so it also lives in the middleware folder, and this is what establishes the rate limits. So here you can see by default it's 10 per minute, and then if it's a pro tier, if it is shown to be valid, then it increases it by 10, so it bumps it up to 100 per minute. There's a couple different authorizations happening here, which can be a little confusing. There's the anonymous authorization, which is the default if you don't put anything. There's basic authorization, which is handled down here, but is outside the scope of this video, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to focus on this portion right here, line 34 to 58. Is where it handles the auth server. So what it's doing is this is going out and it's talking to the auth server. Here, this is the front end for it, and so this is what's the auth server is what's handling the user accounts. It has a Mongo database that tracks the users and tracks the JOT token assigned to the user and tracks the Bitcoin Cash addresses and handles the sweeping of funds. And so all that the bch-api is doing is when it detects a new JOT token, what happened to the code I was just looking at? When it detects a new JOT token, it goes and asks that server, hey, is this JOT token valid? True or false? It's very fast. It does it on every API request that it has. So the idea is that Auth Server app should live on the same machine as your REST API, so that they're very close to one another and there's low latency and not a lot of cost to making these requests saying, hey, is this JOT token valid? True or false? So that's what's set here with this JOT Auth Server. It's an environment variable that you set when you run bch-api, and so the first part here is if that environment variable is not set, it's going to skip this whole thing and warn on the console log that, hey, you didn't set this environment variable, so I have no way of checking the JOT token. If that is set, then it'll go on, and this is where the actual validation happens. It pulls the JOT token from that local's JOT token property that I mentioned, and then it calls the Auth Server it calls the REST API and just says, hey, is it valid? This JOT token that I just received, that comes back as either true or false. So if it's true, then it sets the pro limit, so that when you get down here where the actual rate limits happen, it's checking if it's true, it sets pro, and if it's false, it sets basic, and that's what determines the 10 versus the 100 requests per minute rate limit. Okay, that concludes the presentation. So I've talked about at a high level what REST APIs are and their economics and the problems I see currently in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. I've given a demo of my particular solution to those problems, and hopefully I've walked through the code enough to make you comfortable implementing this in your own solution. If you want to reach out to me, you can contact me, trout@bitcoin.com, and you can also reach me at Chris Troutner on Twitter. If you need help implementing these solutions, or you just want to know more, please reach out to me. I also help oversee developer.bitcoin.com. We've got a lot of solutions there, rest.bitcoin.com being one of them, Bitbox JavaScript library being another big solution. We also have a heavy hand in developing the SLP token ecosystem, and pretty much anything and everything to do with Bitcoin Cash.